In this lesson, I will go over the basic drilling cycle G81 and different variants of it using G98 and G99 G codes. Let's have a look how this works. For this operation, I'm going to use a 4.2mm drill. I couldn't be bothered to draw a 2-flute drill, so we're going to use a 4-flute in my drawing. We've already written the first 5 lines of code when we done our parts program, so refer back to that for what each meaning does of the G codes and the G10, etc. But for now, since we're concentrating on the G81 drilling cycle, we're going to go ahead to where we start activating the cycle. G00 x20 y20 takes us to the position of our first hole using a rapid movement. As with our parts profile program, I'll bring the Z down on a separate line and activate the MO8 to turn on coolant. Here we have our G81 line. The G81 tells the machine we're using the drilling cycle. This is just a standard drilling cycle and not a PEC drilling cycle. I will cover the PEC drilling cycle in a different lesson. I'm assuming our material is 10mm thick. So I'm taking our drill to 2mm past the bottom of the material by using Z-12 on our depth. This sets the depth for each hole as it's drilled. The R1.0 is our retract value. This is the distance above the surface of the material that the drill retracts to after each hole. This assumes that our datum position is 0 on the surface of the material. And to finish off, we add a feed rate. In this case, I've used 50mm per minute. To drill our next hole, all we need to do is give the distance from the first hole to the second hole and the axes. So this hole is 50mm to the right, so we just add x50. The machine automatically drills the hole to the depth of 12mm and retracts to 1mm above the surface, using a feed rate of 50mm per minute, as we defined on the G81 line. The same as our previous hole, the distance in x is 50mm between the next two holes. So adding x50 moves the tool incrementally. We don't need to set the machine into incremental mode to do this. All drilling cycles work incrementally. The distance to our final hole is 40mm along the y-axis, so y40 drills our fourth hole. To cancel our drilling cycle, or in fact any cycle that's active, we use G80. So G80 cancels all cycles that are active. All it's left for us to do now is take the cutter home back to the tool chain's position. But first I like to rapid the cutter away to Z50 so it's nice and clear away from the components and any clamps. MO9 turns our coolant off. Using G53 tells the machine that we now wish to use our machine datum. So X, Y and Z is 0 takes the machine back to the machine's 0 point. MO5 stops the cutter from rotating. And we finish this section of the program off with MO1, our optional stop command. So that's what a basic G81 drilling cycle looks like. Now what about G98 and G99, and what are they? Well, when we're moving between holes, it's best to keep a minimum rapid distance off the top of the material. This is to make the program run as fast as possible. But if we come across a clamp, we occasionally need to lift the tool further up to avoid the clamp. Let's have a look at a program that we use G98 and G99 for, so I can show you how this works. When we add a G99 to our G81 line, the tool retracts to our R value, in this case 1mm above the surface of the material. If we don't insert a G99 here, it will still retract to R1.0. If we don't add the R1.0, most machines will retract to the 15mm of the Z movement above that line. So why add a G99 in the first place? Well, this gives us the option to also add a G98 line within the program, so we can hop over clamps. Let's read through the program so we can see how that works. Dimensionally, it does work the same as the G81, as we've just done. An X50 incremental move takes us to the second hole and automatically drills it. But with this clamp in place, if we continue to rapid to our third hole 1mm above the face of the material, it's not going to end well. So by adding a G98 to this line, we can tell the machine that we wish to rapid to our original rapid position of Z15 and not the position defined by the R1. So G98 in this case tells the machine to lift the cutter up 15mm above the face of the material. When we travel to our final hole, we don't have this restriction as there's no clamps in place, so we can use the G99 command again to tell the machine to use the original rapid distance of 1mm above the face of the material that we defined on the G81 line with the R value. Then as before, G80 cancels our drilling cycle. And the rest of the program you're already familiar with. A top-down view is probably not the best way to visualize this, so here's the same thing again from a side view. We move our tool into position with the G00 rapid command and follow that with a rapid movement down to a safe working distance above the material and the clamps with a Z15 move. We activate our G81 drilling cycle with the G99 code in place and drill our first hole. Our drill retracts to 1mm above the face of the material, or 1mm above the 0 Z point that we set with the datum. Note, the machine is in G99 mode, so it is using the R value at this point. X50 tells the machine to move the drill 50mm in the X plus direction, where it automatically drills the hole. Now the FANUC controls sometimes read a line in front. As it does in this case, it looks ahead and sees the G98 value on the following line, so when the drill retracts, it retracts back to the Z15 position and not the R1 position. It also sets the machine in a G98 mode until we state otherwise with a G99 command. As the G98 command is on this line, it safely hops over the clamp and drills the next hole. For our final hole, there is no clamps in the way, so we can use G99 again to tell the machine that we only wish to retract by 1mm above the face of the component and not 15. So here G99 tells the machine to refer back to the R1 value on the G81 line and only retract 1mm between this hole and the last hole. It is important to note that the G98 and G99 commands go on the position of the hole after we wish the hop to happen. And as before, we finish off our cycle with the G80 command that cancels the drilling cycle. So in this lesson, not only did we learn what the G81 drilling cycle is and how it works, but also the G98 and G99 commands to avoid clamps or other obstacles in the machine while we're using the drilling cycle.